gonna flip him the bird. I'm gonna snatch that diploma and I'm gonna run like hell out of here.
With Stranger Things, the Duffer Brothers set out to create a show that championed outcasts, and we were given the best freak of them all in Season 4 with Joseph Quinn's Eddie Munson. Eddie was seen as a troublemaker, held back in high school and desperate to graduate without putting much effort in. He was unapologetically himself and a new, older friend and mentor for Dustin Henderson, much to Steve Harrington's concern. Quinn's ability to make Eddie quirky and dangerous yet lovable put him firmly in the Stranger Things history books. And you know what happens when we fall in love with a newly introduced character in Stranger Things? Eddie's story ends tragically in the Upside Down, where he sacrifices himself by distracting the Demobats away from Dustin, Steve, Nancy and Robin, declaring it was finally his chance to be a hero. He dies in Dustin's arms, a loss that sends the Bards spiraling into a deep depression for the remainder of Season 4, and that grief and anger carries into Season 5. Eddie embodied everything the early seasons of Stranger Things stood for: defiance, friendship, and the courage to be unapologetically yourself. By the finale, Dustin pays the greatest tribute to Eddie's legacy through his graduation speech, something the freak never lived to achieve himself.
I want to see Vecna's heart on a platter. Just wish I could do it myself.
In the first volume of Stranger Things Season 5, Dustin Henderson is still deeply grieving the loss of Eddie in not just emotional ways. He begins to emulate parts of Eddie's identity, whether consciously or not, as a way of keeping him alive. Eddie represents a kind of freedom that Dustin had never fully embraced before, and he admired his refusal to conform, his unapologetic confidence, and joy in being exactly himself no matter the consequences. So Dustin makes a point of keeping the Hellfire Club alive, treating it as more than a Dungeons & Dragons group, and rather like a symbol of resistance against suburbia and traditionalism. He continues to wear his club shirt well into Season 5, even though it makes him a target for bullying, violence, and the chopping up of a snake. He grows his hair long and wavy like Eddie's, and his attitude shifts, alienating all who care for him. Where Dustin was once enthusiastic, excited, and seeking approval from the popular crowds, he now carries a darker, more defiant, I don't care what you think attitude, and pushes back against authority. As the rest of Hawkins attempts to return to normality after the Rift's opening and Munson's supposed serial murders, Dustin cannot use his own large metal band-aid, so is continually labelled a freak by the whole school. Henderson is still trapped in the rawest stage of grief during Volume 1, and his pain manifests as anger and combativeness, especially towards Steve Harrington, the person who has consistently been his closest protector and friend. Dustin acts recklessly and shirks his responsibilities, including one of Hopper's crawls, for which he is essential. Later, while stalking Hawkins' lab for a shield generator, Dustin and Steve find Dr. Brenner's plans for exotic matter, and race to the roof to stop Nancy and Jonathan from disturbing it. Eager to help Nancy, Steve illogically tries to climb from one part of the melting building to the other, but Dustin breaks down crying, saying that he cannot go through the same feelings of grief again by losing another close friend. It's after this reconciliation with Steve where he starts to grow closer to his friends again, and understand what Eddie actually stood for. Eddie wasn't just rebellious or confrontational for the sake of it, he was genuinely happy being himself, and celebrated people's differences. His defiance came from confidence and not anger. As Season 5 Volume 2 progressed into the finale, Dustin began to channel only the best part of Eddie, and he honours his memory by becoming a fuller, braver version of himself.
Ready, you son of a bitch! Ready!
Dustin's arc comes full circle in the Season 5 epilogue of Stranger Things, set during Hawkins High's 1989 graduation. He is rewarded for his academic achievements by being named valedictorian, a title that is traditionally representing conformity and success within the system. But when Dustin steps out on the stage to deliver his speech, he refuses to let that moment pass without making Eddie proud. Standing before the graduating class, their families, teachers and Principal Higgins, Dustin curses and openly admits how pissed off he's been. He acknowledges just how much has been taken away from the people of Hawkins and all the lives that were lost. Rather than encouraging a return to normal, as the school administration clearly wants, Dustin calls the principal a square and mocks the identical orange graduation gowns that make everybody look the same. To shocked but satisfied faces, Dustin takes off his gown, shirt and tie to reveal a new t-shirt linked to his favourite club, saying, "Hellfire lives." This time the crowd cheers for Hellfire, and in a way, Eddie finally gets recognised as a hero. If Hellfire lives on to graduation 1989, Eddie lives too. Dustin's memorable graduation speech is a direct parallel of Eddie's introductory speech back in the cafeteria cafeteria in Season 4, Chapter 1, The Hellfire Club. He mocks the jocks for obsessing over parties and throwing balls into laundry baskets. He then proudly shares his plan to walk across that stage at his own graduation, where he was to look Principal Higgins dead in the eye and flip him the bird before snatching his diploma and running like hell. Dustin delivers on Eddie's dream. He does in fact flip the principal the bird and grabs his diploma, but to cheers from the rest of the graduands, his mother, and even the OG outcasts, Murray Bauman and Mr. Clark. Eddie declared that 1986 was going to be his year, and Dustin names 1989 as everybody's year. He finally proves Eddie's approach to life right through his speech, and the spirit of Hellfire lives on, but not as a physical club, but as a philosophy to never apologise for who you are.
Rhetorical?
No, screw that. I got a better idea. Way better.
Dustin's valedictory speech is not just deliberately structured to sound like Eddie's iconic introduction in words, but the soundtrack also sets it up as one big final tribute to Eddie and outcasts everywhere. When Dustin shouts, "Screw the system," the trooper from the album Peace of Mind begins playing, which is the very album Eddie held up while exclaiming, "This is music" in Season 4 when the party are trying to find a song to bring Nancy out of Vecna's trance. The 1983 heavy metal album is from Iron Maiden, who have a mascot themselves named Eddie the Head, who appears on all of their album covers and merchandise, and much like Eddie's own demon icon in the Hellfire Club logo. The band's 1986 album, Somewhere in Time, released in the same year Eddie Munson claims that would be his for the taking, features graffiti on the cover artwork reading "Eddie Lives." This prompted many eagle-eyed Stranger Things fans to theorise that Eddie may be making a return in the 5th season, but the Duffer Brothers stuck a stake through the heart of that one, saying to Deadline, "No, sadly, RIP, he's fully under that ground." But Eddie does emotionally return in the epilogue. Even though he didn't graduate in body, he graduated in spirit. Dustin simply helped him across the finish line. The graduation scene completely spins Season 4's view of Eddie on its head. The popular girls, led by Stacey Albright, used to ignore the main party, and she once rejected Dustin outright at the Snowball in Season 2. However, Eddie's influence and the confidence that it instilled in Dustin has finally gotten him noticed, as he gets an invite to her graduation party after his speech. But crucially, Dustin doesn't chase that validation this time. He instead joins his fellow freaks for one last game of Dungeons & Dragons, exactly where Eddie would have wanted him to be. Eddie Munson's true legacy in Stranger Things isn't his cult following or tragic death, it's Dustin Henderson. He taught Dustin the most important lessons in life: to embrace differences, to live proudly, and to never apologise for who you are. Those lessons now live on in Dustin as he goes off to college, and were shared to the whole of the graduating class. Eddie never got to walk that stage, never got to escape the label that Hawkins forced upon him, never got the rebellious future that he wanted so badly. But through Dustin in Stranger Things Season 5, Eddie finally gets his moment.